Today I am attempting something truly mental. Over the past 20 years I have built a whole heap of locations from Middle-earth, from the urban sprawls of Minas Tirith and Osgiliath to the rolling fields of Rohan and the blissful woodlands of the Shire, but today I'm going to try and build one single gaming board for the entirety of Middle-earth, including locations and scenery challenges that I have never faced before.
Back in March we began work on our very first gaming board here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. A double-sided gaming board for our live streaming campaign over on our second channel, Zorpazorp Streams. It's a fantastic beginning, a sort of generic grassy landscape that we can tool up to be a whole bunch of different locations from Middle-earth. But Tolkien's world is more than just grass.
Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to flip over this green beginning and smash out an insane amount of scenery that can be combined in a million ways to make just about any landscape from our beloved world of Middle-earth, enabling us to play just about any story or location in our live battle reports that we want. And we are going to start with a project that you guys have long been waiting for, the mighty halls of Durin and the Dwarven realm of Moria.
Mines of Moria.
Moria. Dark of Moria.
In the distant future, we will be beginning our absolutely massive Moria build, a single board carved as a multi-level mountain fortress encompassing the huge labyrinth of Moria, so today's board is not only going to be perfect for our live streaming setup, but it also needs to be able to drop into the modular mountain system we'll be using down the track for the full mega board. So we're going to get started by flipping over this beast of a gaming board to expose the second side of our double-sided gaming system. We knocked up this frame in the first video on this board and cleverly hid the frame support braces beneath the grassy landscape of the underside to allow this surface to be completely flat, which gives us the chance to make the most perfect modular scenery. I want to have 16 tiles at just under 1 foot wide as perfect squares to unlock unlimited combinations, so with some deft knife work I soon had my first 9 tiles cut to size. Only 9, you say, Lockie, but you were going to make 16. Just shut up and be patient, okay? You'll find out about the other 7 in just a second. Now, you can see when we throw these down, it's going to work quite nicely. So it's time for a bit of texture. Now, I ummed and ahed a lot on what I should do here. Maybe like carve in some crazy geometric patterns, mental dwarven stylings, and eventually decided to just go for boring old flagstones because it just looks the best in this kind of modular setup. I cut a 16 square grid into every tile with my knife and then widened the grout lines with a pencil, and then it was time for detailing with the old scrunched up alfoil ball. And here I hit a little bit of a snag. This new type of foam here in New Zealand has a much tougher outer skin than the foam I used to use in Australia. If I smash the foil into the outer surface, it doesn't really take the texture, but it splits and cracks, whereas any foam that's been exposed or peeled back, it will absorb the rough alfoil print. I experimented with sanding it back, but it didn't really help a great deal, so I decided to just embrace the hurdle, because the smashing and cracked outer skin sort of had a really cool look, like cracking marble, so I aggressively just pounded the crap out of it and then peeled back a few chunks and weathered those, and then I grabbed my pencil and I did much more detail work than I normally would have, kind of carving out the cracks and emphasizing the things I'd made with the impacts and accentuating the damaged marble vibe. I spent several hours doing this for all of my squares, and we can see it looks pretty damn awesome. You'll notice a couple of the squares have had less treatment, and that's because some extra special Moria goodness is going to be glued down onto those in just a minute. But first, it's time to really bring this board to life and spice it up with our remaining 7 tiles, because it is time for some chasms, for any nearby Gandalfs to fall into. We need to start with the depths of Moria, so I'm going to make 7 baseboards for these tiles with 5mm black foam board. These came in little sheets which needed to be cut down, and you can see how these are going to complete our board to get that 16 tile 4x4. Next is our broken stonework, which we're going to use a different XPS foam panel, this time 20mm thick, which when we stack on our 5mm foam board sheets will be the exact same height as our normal 25mm panels. How good is that? I did not even plan it, just came together so well. I'm going to be making a huge range of different styles of modular chasms, but every tile needs to have the broken edge meet the edge of the panel in the exact same point, 10 centimeters in from the edges, so that every single tile will tessellate. We're starting here with two kind of generic straight chasm pieces. I measured out my 10 centimeter guideline in from the edge, and then in between the panel edges, I just go mental, carving a bunch of random jagged chasm edges, zigging and zagging. I cut these down to the right size for our first two panels, and we can see how they line up pretty nicely. I really tried to make the chasm feel super random, so it's not just like a straight line, in spite of the fact that essentially it is. They're kind of having to join and end at the same place with every tile join. So then it was time to weather back the broken rock edge. I carved in a rock face with my blade, and then sort of worked in some cracks that kind of back away from the chasm like it's all crumbling towards the edge, and the 20mm sheets of foam are actually unskinned, unlike the 25mm, so the entire panel surface takes texture much more readily from the foam and the alfoil scrunching into it, which is great for building up really weathered stone right on the edge of the abyss. I then carved in the flagstone pattern and added heavy cracking and damage kind of spiraling back from the chasm, and with those looking amazing, I knocked up two more of them, and now we have a 4-panel long chasm that can span our entire board. Perfect for a little Gandalf-Balrog duel. But it's time to make things a bit more interesting for our modular layout options, so I grabbed a full panel of 20mm foam and marked it out to line up with our next black foundation tile, and then I drew in a little bend piece with our meeting points on two adjacent sides rather than opposite like the chasms. I then carved this following the exact same techniques, and boom, we have a little corner, which works very nicely, right, to kind of shake up the layout. But of course, if we've got this corner piece, we need to make some end caps to give us like full flexibility in the layout. So I cut down another 2 full tiles of 20mm foam to sit over our last 2 black foam core panels, and then I carved in 1 entry point, 10 centimeters in, and then tapered that into like a shrinking crack on each board. I gave them a bit of a different feel for some extra variety, and they are looking good. So let's whack them down on the board and have a play. So this is looking pretty sweet. Now, obviously these aren't glued down at the moment, so as I'm kind of messing about and testing this out, it's pretty janky, but I gave the layout a big test to make sure all the edges were lining up right, and to be honest, I'm getting really pumped at this point. This is like just the damn foundation, and I am hyped to game on this board on the live stream. So let's get some paint down on this really quickly. I gave it a prime by hand with a roller just in black, and then I hit it with a rattle can from nice and high and above to give the kind of propellant enough time to evaporate before it hits the foam, to give it the best chance of not melting the foam. And then once our dark grey first layer was dry, I built up some variation in the chiseled flagstones with an accent spritz of a lighter grey to kind of accentuate the raised details. Then, just to accent the stonework a little more, I gave all of the chasm edges a heavy overbrush and some mottled greys, which gave it a really nice look, and that's good enough now so that we can glue it all together. So I grabbed some liquid nails that was foam safe, thank you Andy, and glued down all of the sheets, and then threw down some weight on them and left them for a few hours to go super solid. Now it's time to slap down all our work so far and look at this beast. The panels work amazingly, and the modularity is absolutely awesome. We've got some crazy layout potential here, but now we need some killer dwarven terrain to take our halls of Moria to the next level, and I have just fallen in love with some damn amazing 3D prints from Conquest Creations' Kingdom of Durak Deep Kickstarter. Now Jakey is a good mate of mine, and him and the team at Conquest Creations have sculpted up some absolutely banger dwarven terrain. We're talking 6 unique buildings, a massive dwarven stronghold which just has some epic fantasy vibes. There's a whole destructible wall system for siege games, and even an interconnecting modular minecart setup to link your buildings together, as well as all your normal awesome scatter terrain. Now the stuff I'm really keen on for this build is some of the smaller dwarven forges and dwellings to represent the workshops and buildings inside Moria. I've got Jakey printing up a whole bunch of those for me at the moment, and these beasts are fully interioured with removable roofs. They're just going to be amazing for this build. I've also deliberately cut the tile sizes to be large enough that they are going to fit one building perfectly on each tile. If you're keen on getting these prints for yourself, check out the Conquest Creations Kickstarter, link down in the description and the top comment, and I'm pretty blown away by the work that Jakey's doing, to be honest. It is phenomenal quality, and the value is just off the charts. So, I got Jakey to send me this little care package of printed stuff, as my new printing setup hadn't arrived yet, and we've got a couple of awesome buildings to kick off our Moria landscape. I gave them a little zap with my lighter to melt away any stringing filament, and then gave them all a prime in dark grey, and then hit the printed cliff components with an extra pass in light grey. I then gave these a super quick paint job, just to get them down on the table as fast as possible for some live streams, and I think these are actually like an awesome example of what you guys can easily achieve at home if you grab Jakey's files. They're printed with a super speedy print setting, and then literally just dry brushed in greys and golds, and look how damn awesome they look set up on the board. Super low effort, amazing results. I was going to glue them down and have like these permanent modular tiles and then throw down a bunch of rubble to dress them in, but I want more of these prints first, so I'm gonna wait until I have them all and then I can lock and glue down the layout. If you'd like to see some more of the Kingdom of Durak Deep in action, Jakey has already got a banging siege battle report over on his channel, Conquest Creations, which I'll link down in the description, and it is such a good game. To sort our negative space that we have on either side of our 4x4 board, I'm going to create a couple of little handy side panels to give us a really sweet area for storing dice trays, black Earl Grey teas, and all of the other detritus of gaming. I found a bunch of old vinyl options in the hot water cupboard of our new house from previous kitchen and bathroom renos, I think, and I decided on this darker pattern as it looked nicer and it was just way easier to cut. I glued it to 20mm thick sheets of foam so that it will always sit below our tiles as a little recessed area, and glued down the vinyl. With that knocked up and cut to size to fill the gaps, we've got a gorgeous gaming landscape, but now it's time for our second scenery bash of the day, and today I am indulging a childhood dream and finally making a board to represent one of my most fantasized about scenarios, the Assault on Glamorgarth from the 2004 Battle of the Pelennor Fields supplement. This book was a Christmas present back in 2004 along with a Mummakil, and ever since then I've desperately wanted to play out this scenario, and you can try and stop me from doing it live on Zorpazorp streams. It will be the very first time I've ever made anything close to an arid or desert board, as this fortress lies in Horondor, just south of Ithilien, and saw many battles between the Gondorians and the Southrons. The most important feature of the board is a wall that runs along the entire length. Oh man, I am so sick of crafting Gondor walls. Please do not make me build another one. All hail Andy Tucker, savior of my sanity.
So these are some beast walls of Minas Tirith. I reckon it's probably over 10 feet if you lay them all out. There's 4 wall sections here, some little buttresses, a gatehouse, 2 big towers, and some stairs. They're designed to be super playable and durable. My mate Andy built these years ago to be like a backdrop for big Pelennor Fields War of the Ring games, as well as the odd siege match. They're all extruded polystyrene foam, but these battlements are actually MDF, these little laser printed, laser cut template thingy. So they're really solid. There's even a couple of spares here as well. Now, they're probably going to need a little bit more detail love to kind of bring them up and get them really sparkling, but I don't really know what I want to do with them or how I want to use them. There's so much here. So let's get off the table. Let's go to floor hammer mode and kind of work out what exactly we've got.
Man, these walls are so badass. I look at them and I'm just dying to play. They're simple and they're playable and they're everything I wanted to own when I was 10 years old. And the Siege of Gondor and Pelennor Fields campaign books came out. We're going to be able to do a whole bunch of different siege layouts with these, but for now, let's focus on the world beyond the walls, the arid forests and dunes of Horondor. I grabbed a sheet of 25mm XPS foam and decided to mix up my panel sizes and go for 2 large 2x2 foot panels rather than the smaller 1x1s we used for Moria. This will look a bit nicer for a more natural landscape as there's less board lines, but it also gives us the chance to lean into what this side of the board does best. Our flip side, the Green Plains, is a solid, gorgeous board for small scatter terrain. The board itself couldn't have any height, as the surface is stuck there and can't go taller than the height of the wooden frame. Back on this side, we can make things as high as we want, because the panels all come off for storage. So we are going to make a properly contoured board that is not suitable for large scatter terrain. I started by carving some small rocky outcroppings just from foam, and heavily weathered them with foam texture, and then primed them in greys just like the Moria chasms. These are actually going to be a little tricky to get looking right, as we are essentially going to blend foam carved stone with real stone aggregates, but I don't have any of my plaster rock molds here in New Zealand. With those glued in place, I grabbed a knife and sliced into not only the baseboard, but also through the top of my middle finger and into the fingernail. Amazing, love that. Thankfully, I wore away the nerves in the fingers on my left hand with a decade of guitar, so I barely felt it. I gave the depressions I'd carved a nice sand to smooth them off, and then I grabbed some multi-purpose filler and smashed it all around the outcrops to try and blend them in and break up that look of, here's a flat sheet of foam I just glued some stuff onto. Then I left that all overnight to dry. To get rid of the bright white, I gave a little dappled base coat in brown just around the place, but the board is yellow. That's the color of sand anyway, so we don't actually need to prime the whole thing. And while that dries, we're going to jump over to do our trees. Now today I'll be using some tree armatures to create an awesome little arid woodland. The region of Horondor, being sandwiched between the lush and fertile woods of Ithilien and the desert scapes of Harad, needs to capture a bit of both. So these should work quite nicely. I twisted them all out to spread their branches, and then had a little play building thickets around the board, and happy with the quantity, I gave them all a coat of brown paint, and then covered each armature in fast drying basing glue from Geek Gaming, and I let it go completely tacky and sticky for about 2 hours. Now there's a real sweet spot for this: too early and the glue is still too wet, too long and you won't have enough tackiness. I reckon I probably left it an hour too long to be perfect, but that's okay. While those trees dry, we're going to go back to the board itself. Now first, a quick dry brush of greys to accent our cliff work, then the whole panel basically gets a coating in neat PVA. Then it's time to bust out the base readies. I grabbed 3 to have a look at: Desert Sand and Stone, Fields of New Zealand, which I've been so keen to use for ages, and Tropical Beach. I sprinkled all 3 around, and I ended up deciding to lose Tropical Beach and just blend the other 2, using Desert Sand and Stone basically everywhere, and then concentrating the Fields of New Zealand in areas of interest like little depressions and around our cliffs. I built the Desert Sand and Stone right up to the rock edges, occasionally putting in a seam of fast drying basing glue to create a nice hold for the larger rocks, and then I knocked over the second panel and the big long 4x1 panel for the walls to sit on, and I sieved out the large rocks to keep the sand profile low so that the walls will sit evenly. Then it's back to our trees. I experimented with a couple of different options and ended up preparing a blend of clump foliage, ripping up my large green clump into smaller clumps to suit the small armatures, and then mixing in some brown coarse flock to make the trees seem a little more like parched and sun-kissed to suit our Horondian landscape. Then I grabbed all my trees and squished a bunch of flock onto each one. The job of the glue and the branches is to simply hold this on for now, so I gently laid them down on the table, and once they were all done, I soaked them all in Geek Gaming Matte Scenic Sealant Spray, slowly rotating each tree to get all sides, and these are super delicate at this point. If you knock it, all of the clump foliage will fall off, but if we can keep them together, they will hopefully set hard as the foam absorbs the sealant and become one rock solid piece. I then jumped back to the boards and I gave them a huge soaking in isopropyl alcohol and Geek Gaming Matte Scenic Sealant to lock them all down super tight. The isopropyl alcohol, it carries the glue molecules down into the wet glue base layer and makes sure that all of the loose large rocks get a really solid foundation. Then I left that all to dry overnight. I glued in all of the trees with high bond PVA, piercing the trunks down into the foam, and then spritzed some Scenic Sealant around the base of each tree and grabbed Fields of New Zealand and brought in a new weapon, Pine Forest Ground Cover. This is the perfect little blend of aggregates to represent the detritus around the base of the pine thickets. I sprinkled it all around each tree and then blended it into the landscape with a little bit of Fields of New Zealand, and then gave the entire board and all of the trees one last soaking in isopropyl and sealant. So there we have an awesome arid landscape, the perfect generic green fields for Rohan to Eregion and everything in between, and a great modular Moria layout. My goodness, this board has become a super versatile slice of Middle-earth, with which we can play just about anything once the live stream studio gets up and running. Remember to check out our stream channel, Zorpazorp Streams, link down in the description, and Jakey's amazing Kickstarter, and I'll see you in the next one.